Welcome to the post-week 4 college football playoff projections. This was an interesting week. I feel like the first couple weeks have been kind of slow to start out with, and the games haven't been as exciting as they normally are at the beginning of the year with non-conference. And I felt the same way going into Saturday, but the Colorado-Baylor game at the end of the night, BYU having everything go right for them, the East Carolina-Liberty delay, it was a fun Saturday. So a couple things changed. First, I have Georgia 1 and Ohio State 2. Early in the season, I don't think we can judge either team off of who they played. They haven't played anybody really, and after the 1-point win against Kentucky for Georgia, that's not enough to judge them off. They've had a game like that every season. So I've continued that. Miami, 35-point win against South Florida. The only comparison you could give for Miami was Alabama's performance against South Florida, which, comparing the two, Miami looked better than Alabama, which is a big thing for Miami, especially being known as a weaker conference in the ACC. Number 4 is where it gets interesting and where I'll spend a little bit more time today talking about. I have Iowa State as the Big 12 champ right now. A lot of people have Utah. I think too many people watch games and say, hey, they won, or hey, they lost, and then judge just off a basic win or lose situation. I was not impressed with Utah at all on Saturday. I thought Utah was a better version of two really bad teams in that game, if that makes sense. Oklahoma State looked atrocious on Saturday, and they only lost by 3. So that to me wasn't like, ooh, they won, like they deserve to go up, because I think the AP had them at 12 last week, and they bumped up to 10. That makes no sense to me. Isaac Wilson threw for 200 yards and 2 picks against a defense that gave up 648 yards to Arkansas a couple weeks ago. And Colin Oliver, the 3-time All Big 12 selection at linebacker, was out for the game. So Utah, to me, looked like a similar offense like they did last year with Bryson Barnes. And last year, they weren't even a top 25 team. So they really need Cam Rising. Cam Rising's a huge question, and it doesn't help that the rumor coming out of Salt Lake City is Cam Rising could sit out and then just get an 8th year next year, especially since, a lot of the seniors are the best players on Utah are seniors, so they won't be coming back next year. I don't get the point of that. I would try to get Cam Rising as healthy as quick as you can, get him back, and then you can make a playoff push this season with what you have now, and then just do a completely new rebranding. Because let's be real, in the offseason, they already announced Morgan Scaley is taking over at head coach whenever Whittingham retires. That kind of seems like once this group of guys leave, then there's going to be a whole renewal process in the department. So I have Iowa State, and there's not really a great explanation for why I have Iowa State. They've kind of started off slow. The one thing I would say is between Utah and Iowa State, I think Iowa State has the better win on the road in a rivalry game against Iowa. But when you look at the stats, Rocco Becht hasn't had a great start of the year. I think I'm just banking off of senior Latin team at receiver, and then a returning starter, 2 returning starters in the backfield, returning starter at quarterback and returning starter at running back. And thankfully Iowa State and Utah play each other November 22nd. So we'll see what it looks like then at the end of the season when everything settles down, because right now the Big 12 did not help at all in their at-large selection. Kansas State losing by 29 in Provo, and then Oklahoma State looking awful. Really, really hurt the conference this week. Getting into the at-large spots for 5, I have Texas. I do understand why people have Texas higher at 1 or 2. They haven't played anybody really, and after Mississippi State Saturday, they have a bye. Hopefully Quinn Ewers gets healthy, and then they have the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma and then Georgia. So after Oklahoma on Saturday, they looked really bad against Tennessee, and then they benched Jackson Arnold for Michael Hawkins, and Venables came out this week and said that Hawkins will be the starting quarterback from here on out. Seems like they're trying something in the middle of the season to see if it'll spark anything in the offense. So I think Texas will be fine in that game. And Texas could definitely make their way up. The Georgia game will be a huge one to see what they can do, if they could change anything up. After that, I have Ole Miss at 6. Ole Miss, again, another team who hasn't played anybody, so it's hard to compare them to other teams because, what have they done? I just give a lot of respect. I think it's really admirable to play teams that you could easily just say, we'll beat them, give them our C game, kind of not give them the best that they have. No, Ole Miss has went in and beaten everybody by like 5 touchdowns. And Jackson Dart looks like a Heisman candidate. I would probably have Jackson Dart second behind Nico Iamaleava for Heisman right now. He's put up incredible numbers. So I really can't wait until we see Ole Miss play better teams, top 15, top 20 teams in the country, to see if they'll continue to look this good. Because last year under Jackson Dart, they put up 55 against LSU. And I know LSU last year, their defense wasn't good. But if Ole Miss can continue just beating down on teams, especially top 25 teams, Jackson Dart could be the Heisman easily. Number 7, I have Alabama. This is kind of the part where I've been taking into considerations how many SEC teams I have, because at 8 I have Tennessee, and so right now the SEC is 1, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I've seen a lot of rankings where they're 4 of the top 5 teams or 5 of the top 6. It'll be interesting to see, because I feel like once they start beating each other, that some of the Big Ten teams will rise and some of the SEC teams will slide down, especially since I have Missouri, my first team out this week. It'll be interesting to see what happens, especially since Bama plays Georgia this weekend in Tuscaloosa. Seeing how that game plays out, if it's a very close game and both teams look good, everything will probably stay the same. There might be a couple, 1 or 2, ranking sliding up or down, but that's not that big of a deal. So we'll see how that goes. I think Alabama has the guys. Ryan Williams, 17-year-old freshman. Everybody's been talking about him. He looks phenomenal and does not look like a 17-year-old. And it helps that you have Jalen Milroe throwing to him in a Kalen DeBoer offense. I think Bama will be fine. I think they're one of the teams that they're solidified in the playoff, and they just have to take care of business all season, and they'll be where they want to be. Number 8, like I said, Tennessee. They've looked like one of the best teams in the country, but I don't want to hype them up so much where other teams haven't had the opportunity to play top competition, where Tennessee already has beaten NC State and Oklahoma in their first 4 games. Like that's impressive, but I think I'll relax on everything. But you can't with Nico Iamaleava playing. Like, some of the throws were like, you couldn't put it better if you dropped it in the receiver's hands. Hitting him in stride there was a post route where, it was probably 15, 20 yards downfield, right, met perfectly with the receiver. That was a jaw-dropping throw. He had a couple in Norman this past weekend that were phenomenal. But I'll keep it at that. Nothing really has changed much. I just think Tennessee, now we look at, could become they could be the top at-large team. They might be playing for the SEC title game. So it'll be interesting to see that. Number 9, I have Oregon. I feel like from 8 to 9 in the seeding line is where there's a big drop-off. Oregon played one good game against Oregon State, and then they had a bye. They come back against UCLA. I don't think we'll really know how good Oregon is until we see them play Ohio State and Penn State. I mean, kind of similar to a lot of teams. Like I said, this has been a slow start of the year, so it's hard to judge based off of what we've seen because we haven't seen much. Number 10, I have Penn State. Drew Allaire has looked a lot better this year. And part of that, I think, is because Coach Franklin has them taking shots downfield and using some of the guys who weren't really being talked about this offseason, especially since Penn State's a run-heavy team. They've been using Harrison Wallace at receiver a lot, which is really great to see. I'm a little shocked, and I don't know if it's a little bit of a gatekeeping sort of thing that Franklin's doing, but they haven't been using Julian Fleming, the Ohio State transfer, yet. So I don't know if it's like, if they'll put in packages when they do play the top teams in the Big Ten, starting against Illinois this Saturday. So it'll be fun to see Penn State challenged, especially since West Virginia hasn't panned out as we thought they would. Another pretty controversial pick I have is the last at-large spot. I gave it to Michigan this week. I think it was an immediate overreaction to Michigan lost at home by 19 to Texas. Well, I think they found their offensive game plan from here on out, and that is a run-heavy team. I had USC in the top 10, and they only threw for 32 yards with who they planned to be their backup quarterback, and they still beat USC. So I think Sharon Moore did a great job of looking at his game plan and changing it from Texas to USC in the matter of a couple weeks. And now that Texas looks like, a lot of people have Texas as the best team in the country, I think that's an early season overreaction that a lot of people could look back at and say, maybe that wasn't what we thought at the time. And Michigan did enough over the span of a season to change, basically flip their whole season around. And I think a big thing to note with Michigan is in the offseason, there was some speculation that they had Jack Tuttle as the starting quarterback, and then he gets hurt. So it doesn't help that you have to start a former walk-on. He doesn't pan out, and then you have a quarterback that specializes in the run. You start him. First game, one of the best games on Saturday against USC in front of 100,000 plus people, and you still get the victory. I think once they establish the run with Khalil Mullings and Donovan Edwards, then you get Jack Tuttle back. You throw it a little more. You give the defense time to rest. So when they are on the field, they're at peak performance. We saw Mason Graham and Will Johnson have an outstanding game on Saturday because they were given time to rest. And then at the 12 spot, I still have UNLV. UNLV, they had a bye week this week, and they still have kind of a gauntlet, but with the group of 5 losses, we saw Northern Illinois losing, Memphis losing. Right now, I think it looks like the Mountain West champion is going to get the spot between Boise or UNLV. It'll be interesting because Boise has Washington State this week. It's I wouldn't say a top 25 game, but a top 30, top 35 opponent. If Boise can win by double digits, that'll send a statement for the Mountain West, or send a statement to the Mountain West and to the rest of the group of 5 that Boise Boise is the most talented team. UNLV just has the most opportunities still. I've talked about this the last couple weeks. So yeah, thanks for listening in. I had a great time as always, and please come back for more next week.